All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to see you today. And my name is Casey Saylor. I'm joining you from the Mental Health Association of Maryland, where I'm the Older Adult Project Manager. I see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you. And today we are talking about relationship psychology, particularly through the lens of changing relationships in later life with adult children and aging parents. So I am very excited to bring you some different, research and information and tips, and also to facilitate some conversations where we get to hear some of your experience and your tips as we work together to navigate this. So first things first, I want to invite folks to unmute and introduce yourself by your first name and what brings you to today's presentation. Eileen, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Eileen, and I have grandchildren. I live in Maryland and Baltimore, and I have grandchildren in Charleston, South Carolina, and I have some conflicts with my daughter-in-law. Been trying to develop a online or connection with them, and my daughter-in-law and I just clash. So I was interested to hear what the presentation might be today that might be helpful.
Thank you, Eileen.
I'm happy to speak. My name is Allison, and I began working with older adults and a lot of parent and adult children and parents. So I want to improve my understanding and insights, and I also have older friends and people in my life, so the more I know, the better I can help myself and others.
Got it. Thank you, Allison.
I'm Georgette, and I may not stick around long. I don't have children, but I do have grandchildren, and I'd just like to hear what you have to say about that. How to bring them on board with your life, I guess, which is difficult because, it's just difficult.
Thank you, Georgette. Yes, and dynamics can certainly be difficult between any age families, but perhaps, very specifically between adult children and aging parents. So I'm very excited that you're here and to talk about this topic. Thank you.
Hi, Casey. I can go next. Sorry, I'm just not putting my video on because I'm kind of post-workout and very sweaty. So I'll save everybody. I'll save you all from having to see my face right now. But so I'm here because I work with long-distance grandparents, and what oftentimes so I founded a company called the Long Distance Grandparent, and oftentimes these tricky relationships come up between adult children and parents, and then that influences the relationship that they have with the grandchildren or are able to have. So that's one reason. I just want to kind of understand the psychology behind it a little better. And then secondly, for my own kind of personal reasons, because I'm going to be navigating, I think, some pretty tricky circumstances with my dad, who I have a good relationship with, but things are changing as he's getting older. And so I just want to kind of be well prepared for that as well. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Carrie. Glad you're here.
Hi.
Playing Wordscape's only 10 minutes a day.
Michelle. I'm sorry. Should somebody else is talking?
Nope. Go ahead, Michelle.
Well, my name is Michelle. I'm in Baltimore, and I kind of stumbled across this this course, and I have been the caregiver for my dad for 5 years before he passed away in 2017, and now my mom has Alzheimer's, and I am taking care of her. I struggled with my dad, and I know I made some mistakes with him, and I am trying not to make those mistakes with my mom. I don't know how to navigate this long goodbye of dealing with a mother who's still a mother, whom I love and respect, but also who's unable to take care of herself. And I'm trying to take care of her. And there's always this clash. Sometimes I treat her like a kid and I don't mean to. I'm trying to help her to age and transition gracefully. And I need to better understand what I can do better to help her and to keep our relationship, to keep our relationship intact as much as possible. But some days, like today, she doesn't even know me. I'm not the only child, but I'm the oldest, and I've been doing this for a long time, and it is exhausting. And I'm trying to not be bitter and resentful. And I need some coping skills and a better way to help my mother by helping myself. So that's why I'm here, and I hope I can get something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I'll just name that, research indicates that for folks who are in that position that you're naming of, being an adult child caring for a parent, talking about it is one of the best things that you can do. Research actually indicates that people who don't talk about it, that don't have someone to talk to and to explain what's going on to, actually are not able to show up for themselves, and they do become resentful, and B, they aren't able to show up as well for their loved one, and those conflicts and things like that start coming into play. And so just the fact that you are here and talking about it is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So glad you're here.
You're very kind. I got to tell you, I'm sure my friends are tired of me talking about it. It's the only subject I have these days. But I'm looking forward to it. So thank you.
And it looks like you have a friend in the chat as well. Carrie chatted you saying that she's in a similar situation as well.
And I so admire people that live with their parent. I mean, I can't imagine the frustrations and the sorrow. I have a mom in assisted living, and that's hard enough, but for you to deal with it every day, I so appreciate, families who, love their families and they take care of them and, do the best they can.
Thank you. And just because you have a loved one in assisted living doesn't mean you love less. So I get what you're saying. So thank you for that. But, we all love our loved ones, right? So great.
Oh, what a wonderful beginning. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves with your first name and what brings you to today's presentation?
Hi, my name's Mary Ellen. I'm kind of the same as Carrie, post gardening though, so you do not want me on screen. I almost forgot to sign in. I was here last week and I totally enjoyed it, so I'm here the same. I have an adult child. My parents are all gone, but I've dealt with that like when I was actually in my 40s. I'm in my 60s. So I've done the whole, one lived with me, one was in an assisted. So we've kind of, I may have some advice later for Michelle, because it's hard, and especially when it's the dementia or the Alzheimer's, it's tough, and you have to, the relationship, and the hardest thing I think is when your relationship changes with your children as adults and with your parents. When you become the parent, it's tough. And I just thought maybe, I got some good tips last week, and I think I will probably get some this week too. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And I just want to mention that as we go through the content today, please feel free, if you have access to the chat, feel free to drop any, thoughts or sharings in there that you'd like to share with the group, and maybe we don't have an opportunity to prompt out loud. And if there's someone that you would like to connect with outside of the presentation today, I invite you to send them a message. I believe you should be able to send messages to people individually if you don't want to send it to the group, and invite them to have a continuing conversation. This presentation is just a beginning, and definitely please reach out to the folks that you'd like to continue chatting with. Beth, I noticed that you unmuted earlier. Would you like to go next?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure that my internet was working. My name is Beth, and I joined the group just to really hear the conversation. Both of my parents are in their 70s, and I live close by to them, and I'm visiting them regularly. And they keep talking about old age like they don't like it, and they are having a hard time adjusting. And so I feel like I just want to know more about how things will hopefully develop in a good way. But I know that I'm going to be their main caregiver or their main person in the future. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Beth. All right. Any final introductions before we move on? No pressure if you don't want to introduce yourself. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for taking the time to help me understand what brings you here today, and hopefully we will be able to have some really great conversations. So for those of you who joined us last week, this first section is going to look a little familiar, which I did on purpose. I know when I first learned this content, it was useful to hear it a couple times, and I'll do my best to explain it a little bit differently as well as we go through it to keep those wheels turning. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, I'm excited to bring you a brief introduction to relationship psychology. So, as we all may know, our brain has a number of chemicals in it that helps it to work. And, just throughout our normal daily lives, these chemicals, sorry, if I pause, that means I'm letting someone into the meeting. I can't do two things at once. So as we go throughout our daily lives, these chemicals just naturally come and go in response to the stimulus that we experience throughout the day. So one of these chemicals, also known as a neurotransmitter, is oxytocin. And oxytocin is known as the love hormone, and it helps us to bond with other people. It actually shows up when we are, experiencing a relationship with someone else, such as a romantic relationship, a friendship, a parenting relationship, motherhood, fatherhood. And this doesn't have to be biological. It could be a foster parenthood or adoptive parenthood as well. But when we are in relationship with someone who, we love, oxytocin shows up, just natural byproduct in our brains. And oxytocin is shown to actually decrease our stress levels and our anxiety levels when it's released in certain parts of our brains. And this is good, because as we go throughout our days and probably our relationships, the stress hormone shows up as well, just as a natural reaction to change throughout our daily lives. And this stress hormone is called cortisol. And cortisol is designed to let you know when you're in danger or potentially in danger. And it's connected to our fight or flight response. It helps to kind of put us on alert and notice, like, oh, I have to do something in order to keep myself safe in this moment. And, cortisol shows up in a variety of different circumstances, from serious things like maybe a car accident to not so serious things as getting a text message from someone maybe you don't want to talk to right now. So cortisol shows up all throughout our lives and relationships, and it's just naturally there. And, when cortisol shows up in our system, it is an alert to our system to do something, right? To take action in some way or to freeze. And when cortisol shows up in the short term, it's a very good thing, right? It propels us to action. It helps us to do what we need to do in that moment. But in the long term, cortisol actually starts to run us down. It impacts our immune systems in a negative way. It can make us sick. And that's called long-term stress. And so cortisol is something that needs to be controlled. And that's where oxytocin comes in, right? Oxytocin actually helps us to decrease the cortisol levels in our brains and in our bodies, which is very important to helping to manage a healthy brain. So it's important then, through this lens and looking at relationships, to bring more oxytocin in and help to keep the cortisol out of our relationships as much as possible. And that being said, you will never completely keep cortisol out of your relationships. I love my husband very much. I still, get frustrated and stressed and have that cortisol show up throughout the day, just in reaction to natural things and natural differences. And so some tips from relationship psychology in order to help bring this balance between oxytocin and cortisol, because that's what it really is, it's a balance. Take a step back during conflict. Take time out to gather your thoughts before a conversation, instead of being, perhaps impulsive and saying the first thing that comes to mind. Another tip is to set a specific time during the day to talk about conflict. And if you don't talk about it during that time, let it go. As individuals, we can practice healthy coping mechanisms and self-care for ourselves, right? Because our relationship is us and another person, the first person being us. And so it's so important to take care of ourselves to make sure that we are showing up as a healthy participant, number one. And I have a relationship theory that I'll share in a moment that will illustrate that back and forth. And with the other people in the relationship, we can practice self-care together, actually, by doing things that everyone enjoys and that everyone finds relaxing. That helps to stimulate oxytocin, not only from the act of taking care of yourself, but also from doing it in relation and hugging each other throughout the day, at least once a day. It's just that physical contact brings that oxytocin naturally into your system. And lastly, rehash things that you have in common and enjoy doing together. Our brains naturally tend to focus on difference, focus on problems. It's something called the negativity bias. And in our relationships, we can make it a point to bring that focus back to the commonalities and bring that focus back to the things that, we really enjoy doing this together. Why don't we make it a point to fit this in? That is a very intentional aspect that we can bring into our relationships to help stimulate that oxytocin on a daily basis. We can also celebrate strengths of the individuals in the relationships and of the relationship itself and work on weaknesses. There are not going to be any relationships in our lives that do not have weaknesses, just like there are no individuals in our lives who do not have their own individual strengths and weaknesses. We're all unique and we all have things that we're very good at and things that we could work on. And that comes into our relationships. And so in our relationships, we can really make it a point to tell the people that we are in relationship with what we see them being good at. Tell them what those strengths are that you observe. Make it a point to name them and celebrate them. And when weaknesses show up, and they undoubtedly will, work on them together, right? Bring them into the spotlight and say, I noticed that this shows up when this happens. What can we do in order to help this not be a speed bump in our relationship? Some other ways to bring oxytocin into your daily relationships is through eye contact. That physical touch, hugs and kisses. We can also get oxytocin from interacting with our pets, dogs, cats, and actually petting them. Again, it's a relationship, right? Performing acts of altruism, doing something nice for the person that we're in relationship with. Giving empathy and receiving empathy both also stimulate oxytocin in our brains. And I'm going to say that again, giving empathy, so being empathetic towards another person, and also receiving empathy, having someone being empathetic towards you. Both ways stimulates that oxytocin and helps to strengthen the relationship bond. So I took the time to name all these things because a lot of these things are things that just kind of naturally happen throughout our days that we maybe don't give a lot of thought to, right? And if we know how powerful they can be, we can make it a point to make sure that they happen every day in order to strengthen those relationships through the natural secretion of brain chemicals, oxytocin. Salvador Minuchin was a family therapist born and raised in Argentina, and he developed structural family therapy, which addresses problems within a family by charting the relationships between family members. And Salvador Minuchin describes family relationships as a dance, where each person's movement is highly dependent on the movement of others. So you can see the little illustration on the screen, person A plus person B plus person A plus person B, and so on. It's a dance with a step back and forth as each person responds to the other. And the point that Salvador Minuchin was trying to make is that person A's behavior, whoever starts the interaction, is setting the tone for a continued trajectory potentially. And wherever person B is as well, the way that they respond is also influencing that trajectory. And one of the ideas around this theory is that, I'll use myself and my partner as an example. Let's say that he's having a difficult day. He's frustrated from a phone call earlier. And I come downstairs for lunch and he says, "How's your day going?" Right? But he says it in that kind of like, he's mad about something kind of way. Well, a natural response from me, person B, would be to say, "What is he mad at me for?" Right? And so I may respond, in a kind of defensive way, fine, with some kind of tone in my voice, and a defensive remark, which then will, continue his, anger potentially, except now it's redirected a bit because what is she mad at me for? And this dynamic naturally happens without us even noticing a lot of times, because it's in not our words perhaps, but our tones, body language, things like that all contribute, but it's occurring. And the reason I wanted to bring this theory to you all today is because if we know that this dance is occurring and that we are playing a role in it, we can pause and change it potentially. We can change our role. And so if I am able to see that my partner is angry in this moment and he didn't react to my tone very well, I can pause and think to myself, okay, I'm not making this better this moment. What can I do in order to change the trajectory that we are now on? And I might use that as an opportunity to check in with him and say, okay, I see you're upset. What's going on? Boom, trajectory changed. So this is a power to know that this is a dance. And I encourage you all to change up your steps when you see it happening. Another theory that I want to bring to you today is from William James. And William James was a psychologist and philosopher who had a major influence on the development of psychology in the United States. He was active during the mid-1800s and early 1900s, and among his many accomplishments, he was the first to teach a psychology course in the United States, and is often referred to as the father of American psychology. So William James ventured that the ratio of one's accomplishments, let me say this again, happiness ventured William James, is a reflection of the ratio of one person's accomplishments to their aspirations and expectations, right? So the things that I accomplish compared to what I hoped I would, that equals happiness. So if you're accomplishing what you hoped you did, that's a 1-to-1 ratio, you're happy, congrats. And I want to bring this to us today to adapt this theory to relationships. When adapted to relationships, you get the equation on the slide. Happiness becomes the success, which is the degree that others meet our expectations over what the expectation was. So we are happy when other people meet our expectations, basically, is William James's theory. And again, normal families have conflict and dysfunction, and there are going to be expectations that are just not met in any family relationship. And every family member is unique and different, right? So our expectations probably have to change between family members. And so what this theory kind of posits is that in order to achieve happiness, love, and acceptance, changing your expectations may be key. And I give this to you as an offering to consider, what are the expectations that you have for the people that you're in relationship to? Are they realistic? Are they typically not met? And is that a source of unhappiness in this relationship? And is this an expectation that can be changed in order to better impact the relationship? Maybe it's not. Maybe it is an immovable boundary for yourself, and that's fine too. We need to protect ourselves through our boundaries. But maybe it's something more fluid. Or maybe if one thing can't change, maybe something else can, if relationship success is a goal. All right. So any questions, comments on any of these kind of relationship psychology theories before we move on?
I'll just say that it reminds me of several years ago when I went to a therapist. I walked out of his office, but he told me, he said, "Michelle, you're banging your head against a brick wall and the wall doesn't care." And I thought, this is not helpful. But now that I'm sitting here, it was about me managing my own expectations. It's difficult. It's really hard to do because yeah, it would be helpful, but I feel so angry inside sometimes, and I want the other person to do the heavy lifting and manage their expectations of me first. It's always me managing my expectations, but I get your point. That's all I wanted to say. It's a great point.
Oh, I totally hear you, Michelle. And, sometimes, unhealthy relationships are just unhealthy. And there's a number of different theories about how to manage unhealthy relationships. Some people say remove them from your life. Others, there's the idea of distance and finding a healthy, arm's length in order to maintain those boundaries when possible. But if those things aren't possible, then that more active stance potentially becomes helpful, because like you said, if nothing moves, nothing moves. Thank you. Georgette, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I do. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because my screen keeps defaulting back to a launch mode. So I just want to say that, managing expectations in any relationship is really important. And one of the biggest things I ever learned in my life is not to have any expectations at all of anybody. It's very hard with family not to have expectations, but people are what they are. And, you just have to accept it. You really almost can't have expectations with adults. That's all I have to say.
Georgette, that is a level of wisdom. My mother-in-law says that quite frequently, and it's difficult, like you said, not to have expectations of
Especially
those
of
around
children
us.
and grandchildren,
Mhm.
but not to have any. You know, the whole thing is accepting people who they are.
Mhm.
And
Meeting
if you
them where
can't, you
they're at.
probably need to walk away.
Meeting them where they're at. Yes. Thank you so much for naming that, Georgette. And I want to name too that, you know, I bring these things to you today as a learning opportunity, because our brains are malleable, right? If we are in a pattern, maybe we've been in a pattern with someone in our lives for a long time, and it's just not working. It doesn't make us happy. Whatever the outcome is, if we like it, things can change. We can rewire our own brains, and you know, the relationships are malleable if both parties are participating. And of course, you know, when it's one party and the other party is not an active participant, then we get into some different strategies and different kinds of psychology. But you know, focusing on family relationships where everyone is participating, you know, I think these strategies can really help to manage that dance when people are dancing. Yes, Linda, everyone does the best that they can with the tools that they have, and some people have more tools than others. Certainly. And I'm hoping that these theories are some tools in your own personal toolbox today. So let's shift gears. I am mindful of the time and zoom in particularly on aging parents. So as we get older and as parents get older, the roles change, right? Parental roles change at several points as a child grows, including the transition from adolescence to adulthood. And as these changes happen, parents must make adjustments in their own relationship with that child. And one of the ideas around these roles and these changes is tolerance. Just as you may not always get along with your parents, your child will likely feel the same way about you. There will be intergenerational differences, whether these are in values, ways of doing things, technology, whatever that may look like. But there will be differences just based on the generation and the time that they're growing up. And bridging these differences with acceptance is key. And acceptance towards our adult children and also towards ourselves, because we are all only human. With young children, a parent's task was to fit them into your life, teach them what you think is important, and plan for their future. With adult children, that role reverses. Parents now need to fit into their children's lives, understand that their children's beliefs are important, and respect the child's agenda and the child's plans for the future. It's a pretty big flip that occurs there, and a very big change. And responsibility as well. Adult children marry and have their own children, and parents become less of a priority than their new family, perhaps. This does not mean that the parents are less loved. Your role as an emotional supporter and tireless cheerleader are still extremely important and valuable. And at the beginning of childhood, the older parent cares for the young child. At the end of parental lives, that flips. The younger child cares for the older parent. So these are changes that just naturally occur as children age and the relationship shifts. And so I want to pose the question to the group: has your relationship with your parents changed with age? Any thoughts?
This is Allison. I can say something about that. My mother also has dementia, so it's definitely changed. And I definitely am like the parent. And yet, there's still very much a space for honoring my mother for the role that she's played in my life as mother, respecting that. And it's actually become much more positive because she was not always, was stressed out with a lot of different things in relationships and dysfunction, I think, when she was younger. And now it's just all about loving one another and making sure she's taken care of. So, so for me, it's been a positive, but I think that's because I don't have to deal with the day-to-day things, because I hear about my aunt who my cousin takes care of, who also has dementia, where she does get into like yelling because she gets frustrated. So what you were talking about earlier with the cortisol and all that. But when, you're coming in and someone else is doing the primary caretaking, you can focus more on the relationship and the positives, or, at least you don't have to do both, which I think it would be, so hard.
Thank you for sharing that, Allison. Any other thoughts? Michelle put in the chat, yes, I don't get an allowance anymore. Thank you, Michelle. All right. Well, as Allison illustrated beautifully, thank you, Allison, parent-child relationships are complicated. And, you named a couple different reasons where those complications can come in, particularly in older age, but they're complicated at any age, right? A study interviewing parents over 90 and their senior children shows that they mutually support each other through emotional support, advice, and practical supports. Practical meaning financial, day-to-day, kind of daily living exercises. Past experiences, good and bad, influence what the relationship is today. Old feelings and resentments make it much harder to help the parent and to do the caregiving job. Some express frustration about the demands of helping a parent when they expected to spend retirement doing things for themselves. These feelings were compounded by social influences that limited their ability to talk about these feelings. As I mentioned earlier, research shows being able to talk about, even just to simply talk about those feelings is so important to processing and helping get that cortisol out of our system. But that frustration is present. So if you are feeling any of these things that we've mentioned so far, please know you are not alone. Research indicates that this is an experience that many adult children are experiencing in relation with their aging parents. And so I want to really zoom in for a moment on taking care of yourself as a caregiver. If you are someone who is either preparing for the role of being a caregiver for your aging parent or already in that role, these are some self-care tenets from the Alzheimer's Association. It's very important to find time for yourself. Consider, as Allison mentioned, if help coming in during the day or respite care. Respite care is a service offered by many local departments of aging. If you are local to Baltimore County, I have the resource for Baltimore County in here in a couple slides. If you are not local to Baltimore County, I encourage you reach out to your local Department of Aging and ask about respite care for caregivers. And it's basically an opportunity for someone else to take care of your loved one so you can have some time for yourself. Know what resources are available in your community. Adult day programs, in-home assistance, meal delivery are just some of the services that can help. And many of them your loved one may be eligible for low or no cost. Become an educated caregiver. As the disease progresses, whatever condition you are caregiving your loved one for, it may become necessary to adopt new caregiving skills and strategies. Your role may change a bit as whatever ails them progresses. So it's very important to know what that progression looks like and how you may need to pivot. Get help and find support. Not only is it important to talk to others, but sharing those strategies. This group today is a wonderful place to start this conversation, but please don't let this be the end of it. If you are in this situation, I encourage you, if your loved one is experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's, connect with the Alzheimer's Association's 24/7 helpline. They can connect you with a local support group of people who are also experiencing this same situation. And not only is it a place to talk about it, but it's a place to be understood. Right? People are experiencing the same thing, and also to share tips and resources and put our brains together to figure this out. Another tip is to make legal and financial plans. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Allison. Put the number to Maryland Access Point. Through the Department of Aging can refer you to various resources for older adults. Wonderful. So Baltimore County's number, 410-887-2594, and Baltimore City, 410-396-2273. Thank you so much, Allison. Making legal and financial plans is a self-care activity. Putting plans in place after an Alzheimer's diagnosis is important. This step allows the person with the disease to participate in decision-making and offers guidance to the caregivers. So you feel like you have some structure as you move forward. Managing your level of stress, that cortisol in our brains. Try to find relaxation techniques that work for you. And if your stress becomes overwhelming, seek help from a doctor or counselor. Take care of yourself by eating well, exercising, and getting enough sleep. So important. Sleep sets us up for the rest of our day. Know that you're doing your best. Accept changes as they occur, and visit your doctor regularly. Take the time to get checkups and pay attention to your own health, whether it's exhaustion, sleeplessness, any changes in your own appetite or behavior. Ignoring these symptoms in yourself can be very unhealthy and actually cause us to get sick, which in turn will impact the way that we're able to show up for our loved one who we're caring for. So please make sure to keep up those activities for yourself. The Baltimore County Caregivers Program has a number of wonderful resources, including a support network that meets the third Wednesday of the month, virtual resource sessions, workshops. I strongly encourage anyone who's in this position to reach out and get involved with this program. So you can do that by accessing it directly as listed here, or that Maryland Access Point number that Allison put in the chat. All right, so I just want to take a couple seconds. Any tips from the group for managing these relationships in a healthy way? The child to aging parent relationship. Anything anyone would like to share?
Hi, it's Michelle. I don't have a tip, but I was talking to a woman at the La Clinica Day Spa. I was going there for a facial, and we were sitting in the waiting area, and she was talking about her mom, and I was talking about my mom. And I asked her, I said, what do you do when your mom does stuff like that? And she responded by saying, I just go, oh, Mom, and then redirects her mother in another way. And I thought, wow, that's really good. And I mean, I tried it. I was like, oh, Mom, but I got to tell you, my mother was really getting on my nerves. It just didn't work. But I'll share that with the group, because when I heard it, it did make me feel like that's something that I could do. And what I tend to do, that's the negative thing. This is why I'm here. The negative thing that I tend to do is I'm hoping my mother is going to look at me logically and go, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense. But she never does, because she can't. And I am the one who has to face that. So I guess what I've heard today is that I am not able to manage my mother and fix her. I have to fix myself. And it is going to be very hard to do that. That's all. That's all.
Thank you for naming that, Michelle. And if I could just recommend, it sounds like that's not only, you know, a caregiver role that you're experiencing, but also coping with your mother's disease is a large element of that acceptance that you're naming. And if you aren't already connected with a counselor or support group, I would really recommend becoming connected just to help process that, because that is a hard pill to swallow.
Yep. Sure. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, I think that you're on the right track. Like one of the best advice I got, and I've had a few, my mother had dementia and we dealt with that. And now I have a brother, I'm the youngest. And someone told me pretty recently that because a lot of times you go visit them and they just say the same thing over and over, and they ask you questions, and then, you know, you should let them get into their world. Don't try to bring them into your world. So, you know, don't walk in, like if I walked in with another family member, don't walk in and say to him, hey, do you know who this is? Just say, hi, look who I have. I have your brother here. Because, you know, you don't bring them into your world because they can't do it, and they'll just frustrate you. And then just go into their world. Like, for instance, there's another sibling of ours who passed away, and if he asked me how he is, I would tell him he died, and then he would be sad, and then it would go over and over, and I realized, like, you just say fine. Like, you don't try to you just get into their world and just answer their questions. And it depends. He's verbal, so, and he always knows who I am, and that's always good. But I think you have it right in that you can't change them, but you can change yourself and how you react to it. And one thing, my mother was in assisted living, and I used to be so upset. And when I would come home, my husband said to me one day, I know you're upset. I know you don't like that she's there. He said, but put yourself in her shoes. She's not, and luckily she wasn't upset and like, she doesn't really know what's going on. Like, so do what you can do that makes her happy. So we played cards. I took her stuffed animals. Like, do what makes her happy, because she's not as upset as you are. You have to deal with your own thing. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And Eileen, if you have a quick comment, then we have to move on. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. My sister was 4 years older than me and had Alzheimer's, and I got to experience in a group meeting someone doing improv. And what I learned from that is that when you do improv, no matter what the person says in front of you, you say yes to it. And then you build on it and take it somewhere else. And no matter what the person says back, you say yes to it. And it doesn't matter that it makes sense. It doesn't matter that it was what was in your mind. You let go what's in your mind and hear what they say and take it from what they say and move on to what they're saying, and then say something back and see if they respond to that. And if they don't, you say yes to whatever they said. And your time is not important except to be there. You're not there to produce anything, or just to have happiness and just to spend time with them, as just to have fun with them. And that's what we did with my sister. We dressed her up for every holiday. We played games with her, did puzzles, did bingo that she didn't even know where the beat was on bingo, and just did all kinds of fun things. So that's all. I'll move on.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Oh, what a wonderful conversation. I wish we had like another hour, but we are coming to the end of our time, and I do want to honor the interest that we had in the other side of this conversation, parenting adult children. And so I will try to go through this a bit quickly. But I wanted to include information, particularly looking at COVID-19 and the pandemic's impact on these relationships too, because it is impacting these relationships. And so research in July 2020 showed that over 50% of young adults resided with one or both of their parents. And that is a large number of adult children under the same roofs as their parents. Parent and child roles are different in adulthood, as we illustrated earlier on. That was through the lens of you and your aging parent, but I want to encourage you to flip that now. The roles between you and your adult child have changed similarly. And, you know, it is a balancing act to balance legitimate concerns for safety with the adult child's need to feel independent, whether that's through the lens of pandemic safety or any other kind of safety. And one role that you as the parent can play is being a thought partner as the adult child works through their options, right? That's very different than telling them what to do. It is thinking with them. And this dynamic can be difficult, no matter who you are, particularly based on those changes in roles that we talked about earlier. I want to name that it is common in any kind of pandemic or emergency situation for people to feel increased anxiety and fear around finding resources, for folks to feel uncertain. How do I plan for today, tomorrow, 6 months from now? For people to check in with themselves and others about symptoms, to sanitize and clean, perhaps to an amount that is excessive, to experience hypervigilance is very common, and to have a feeling of helplessness, not knowing how to keep yourself or others safe. These are, I think, things that, many people, even 2.5 years into the pandemic, are still experiencing to some degree, even though it may be a bit different now than when the pandemic started. And these are reactions that impact our relationship with one another, right? Particularly if one person in the relationship may be on a different place in the spectrum in their reaction than you are. And so a couple things I want to offer you, a couple ideas for parenting adult children during COVID-19. Thank you for joining us, Georgette. Listen well, appreciate and sympathize with their struggle during this disruption. And, feel free to let go of those reins, let them set the pace and intensity of family interactions, particularly if they're a bit more conservative than you are in their reaction to the pandemic at this time. Be clear about safety. Work together to define the rules for maintaining your household bubble, if that's something that your household is doing, or maybe your household isn't quite doing the bubble at this point, but has a different guideline. Work together to be clear about what the safety is for your unit. Accept their pace. Adult children may not choose to spend time at home the same way you do, and that's okay. Talk about self-care and help build time and room for everyone's needs. On the flip side, maybe they are spending time at home and you're not. Feeling that out, accepting each other's pace, and building in room for everyone's needs, the pace they're going. Give everyone space. If you are in a situation where you're spending a lot of one time with that adult child, you may be seeing old dynamics coming back up again with so much togetherness. That's just something that naturally happens in families based on psychology. It's fascinating, really. But if there are several adult children under the same roof and spending a lot of time together, it's important to give them space to work out disagreements and struggles. And the same with you as well. And be flexible. Check in to see what's working. Ask that question and what isn't going so well. Get feedback, be willing to make changes in maybe the structure that you currently have in place, whatever it is. Maybe there's something about it that isn't working for everyone. ask about it, be open to changing it, and asking, how does this need to change to better impact everyone else and the family unit? And the last thing I want to offer you is meaningfully connecting. No matter what age our adult children are, intentionally staying in touch through things like phone calls, video chat, texting, writing letters, sending care packages. There are ways that we can touch and embrace each other, even if it's from a distance. So really intentionally staying in touch, even if you see them in person once a month, those little touches throughout the time can really help to bring that oxytocin to the relationship, even at a distance. Some other ideas, particularly through the lens of togetherness with an adult child, attending classes together. What is a topic that you are both interested in, going in person or virtually? This one is one of my favorites. Watch a Bob Ross painting episode together, either in person or virtually at a distance, and paint along. Read the same book and chat about it, a personal book club. Backyard bird watching together or apart. If you're apart, sharing photos. Playing board games is available virtually as well. There's a link here to a resource. And a number of other ideas are available at these links. And particularly for grandchildren, I included the link to Carrie's website, thelongdistancegrandparents.com, for anyone who is interested in diving in more into that topic. She has some wonderful resources. And of course, as I mentioned before, you are half of the relationship. Take care of yourself so you are able to show up as your best self and be a positive influence on the relationship. All right, so we are at 12:04, and if you are experiencing a lot of cortisol in your system, stress, worsening chronic health problems, increased use of alcohol, tobacco, loss of hope, I encourage you to check in with yourself, notice if these things are happening, and it's time to address your stress if they are. Start out by talking to someone you trust. If you are open to mental health treatment, that is certainly a resource. And there are a number of things that you can do to tap into your own self-care. I'm sure we all have routines, and we've talked about a number of different items today. But there are also free phone lines that you can call as well. Maybe you're not ready to formally start treatment or talk to a counselor. I invite you to touch base with one of the free either counseling phone lines in Baltimore County or the peer support warm line that we have locally as well. And I'm going to pause there and pull up those numbers to put in the chat for you. And while I'm doing that, we're at 12:05. So I want to just thank everyone for coming today, and I will pause the recording and open it up for any conversation that would like to occur.